Recording. Okay. Hey, everybody. We are discussing the first three chapters of Joe Brewer's The Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth. And we're going to jump right into chapter one. What I'd like to do is talk about three chapters at a time, and that roughly is about 20 minutes each. There are nice uh, questions at the end of each chapter. And so we'll just spend a few minutes talking about each of these three chapters, and we'll just jump in and get started. So if you do have a copy of the book, the first chapter um, is called The Cultural Evolution of Planetary Collapse. So these first three chapters kind of really jump into collapse and planetary thresholds, and so we'll get into each of them. But this first one, the discussion questions start on page 8, and there are three discussion questions that are included here. I know I rushed right in. We didn't even say hello or do introductions, but maybe we'll do that as we answer this question. What does it mean to form a social niche? How is it possible to inherit one and then build upon it? So he's talking about things like the built environment, but also culturally, how we inherit things. And that's part of how it makes this evolution happen for us culturally. All right, I'm expecting you all to be like good students who like raise your hands and share answers here. All right, Dave Wolf, thank you.
Hey, Karen. Um, so one of the things that came up for me, I don't remember where I heard it, um, but I'm sure there's some statistic somewhere of um, one of the probably the greatest determining factor of what like religion you become a part of is like who you're born into, which strikes me as like relevant to like this specific question, like an example of a social niche or niche or however you say it. It's like I was born into, well, actually I was adopted. So I was adopted into a family, but locally here, and was raised Catholic. um, so now not everybody ends up that way later on in life, but probably growing up, um, you kind of take on the cultural norms of the community that you are born into, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. So I'll stop there.
Cool, thanks, Dave, and thanks for jumping in and being a icebreaker there. Thanks, Bryce.
Oh yeah, it's I kind of took it as the pathways that we take and where they lead us. And in college, I got involved in the anti-war movement. Vietnam War was still going on back then, and that led to all sorts of discoveries otherwise. And then in later years, I joined the Green Party and got very much involved with that and more environmental issues. And um, concurrently with that, a book club formed um, from some local friends, and we used to meet at Cafe Fix and discuss books on social organization and such, basically inequality and such. And that then kind of like devolved into um another book club called Pathways to Sustainability that was over at the Urban Ecology Center, which then that morphed into Transition Towns Milwaukee, which I was involved in that quite a bit, but then not as much as a lot of other people were because it was uh, dominated largely by River West people. And I'm down here in South Milwaukee. Um, and then the whole permaculture thing after that, it's like, and the community, it's just so huge in all of these things. You start getting to know people, and it's it's this huge social niche, so to speak. But then we try to figure how the heck we can work together and adapt to the changing paradigms of how communication is done and such. People come and people go. Um, things change, and it's the challenge is building upon it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those insights, Bryce. And I do feel like we're starting to get a little bit better at building the resilient network and the alliances across difference. And I hear you about kind of the Milwaukee context, like the River West being a powerful kind of attractor in its own way, but also kind of distorting the gravity field around it.
Yes,
Um,
it did greatly.
yeah. And I have been, I live on the south side, I live in Bayview, and I keep getting drawn into River West conversations, and I have like a radio show, like I don't know why it's happening, but they're drawing me towards that, and I'm seeing it as an opportunity. But I do hear you. I'm wondering if Juniper and Sarah have anything about this first question. Otherwise, we can jump into. Oh, Juniper's off mute.
Yeah, I'm really here to explore concepts of culture because I think our all of our culture is fundamentally broken, even within agriculture world, the academia aspects and all of that. And I've just rejected all of it and found very different ways. So I've never been part of the group. Like when permaculture came around, I'm like, I grew up doing this and I've got some guy telling me things that my great grandma taught me when I was 8 and I can't with you. And but it's really, really hard for me to join any of the bigger cultures. So that's kind of why I'm even here in the design school, is to figure out what that looks like as we are birthing a new culture, because the old culture is I can't participate in at all.
I hear that, and thank you for sharing that. And I do hear that I'm also kind of struggling with being coherent in systems that I thought were my people, and realizing that kind of just working on getting some internal integrity and coherence was a necessary step, and that some of those relationships have fallen away, but other doors have opened, and I'm feeling like I'm pointed in the right direction at least. Sarah, do you want to jump in with anything on this question, or shall we move to the second one?
Yeah, I'll just say a quick thing. I'm glad that we are having this discussion for this book. Like I bought it as soon as I heard about the design school, and I didn't want to read it alone. So I'm so glad that I get to go through this book with people. And also this weekend was like a busy weekend for me, so I asked my sister to read the book to me while I washed dishes. So we got to have a discussion while I was washing dishes on the first three chapters. And then so I get to come here. So it's like I get double book club. And so I liked the aspect of social niches also including stories we inherit. So we talked a lot about stories that we're given or are told a lot around us that honestly, a lot of them need to be questioned. And so, like, how we frame what success is, what does it look like to be like in a supportive community? That's like all of those things are very subjective. And if the stories are based out of like these paradigms of be better or like domination, then it finds its way in how you um, perceive life itself. So we spend a lot of time talking about what kind of stories we inherited growing up in the South, attached to church, where there are a lot of different like stories that are pretty rigid, and that how we're growing out of them now and trying to rewrite or choose stories that are more supportive for ourselves and other people. So I'll pause there.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. That is amazing. Um, I was having conversations last week with My co-presenter Dylan, Dave had a chance to get to know Dylan a little bit more, and he's a recent college graduate with an engineering degree, and we were talking about, and I'm an engineering school dropout, and we were talking about like the kinds of things that, and I remember my classmates and his classmates currently doing internships with like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and like the future that you can look forward to. The highly compensated, high status job that my mom wanted me to become an engineer. His parents wanted, and having this epiphany of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be working on these horrible projects if I become an engineer. But this was what I was told, if I'm good at math and I go to college and I get a good degree, I'll get a good job. And this is the nightmare that I've been preparing for. So we had a really nice conversation about like inheriting some of these stories about, as you say, that aren't necessarily where at least he and I, independent of each other, had discovered that we didn't want to put our life energy into those places. There's two more questions here, so let's take a look at discussion question number two. Maybe I'll kind of combine them because we're doing great on time here. What does it mean to say that runaway cultural evolution is the root cause of our planetary predicament? And we can even just spend some time on the word predicament versus problem. And then discussion question three for this chapter: how can we learn more about cultural evolution so that the problem becomes the solution? Such a beautiful permaculture concept there. Well, learn how to regenerate the earth. So, yeah, jump in. Who's got a comment?
Got a quick one.
Yeah.
Yeah, first way I see this whole thing about the cultural evolution being runaway, it's more a question of how we have allowed ourselves to have our interpretations of our wants versus our needs defined by advertising, so that we are wasting our time accumulating things that really do not do anything much to advance um, our perpetuity or that of our descendants on this planet. In other words, we're buying a lot of junk, doing a lot of stupid things for dumb reasons, and we're letting other people define that. The goods and services that, well, the technological uh, stuff out there now, the computers and um, fueled, combustion fueled engines and all this kind of stuff. Those are all fine and dandy. Those are great tools. The problem is how they've been implemented. There was no controls put on how this stuff was expanded to begin with. If there had been, then um, we wouldn't be in nearly as big a mess as we are now, if a mess at all.
Thanks, Bryce. Juniper?
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay, cool. So look, if you look at it in like an old world, so-called old world and new world way, the old world at one point they were not extractive. They lived in harmony with the land, and at some point the evolution diverged on some whole other way. Whereas in, like where we are now in Turtle Island, that didn't happen. People still maintained an evolutionary path that was cohesive with the environment. And so, like when you say that, that's the older way that happened that got brought here. If that evolution had continued to happen here in a non-extractive way, we could have a very different culture here. So when you're talking about the evolution, it's not. It became an evolution like globally, but it wasn't really that long ago that there's actually two different paths of evolution that were happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you for that contrast of the old world and new world. I'm looking at the time and I'm wondering if we should skip forward to I like to have about 20 minutes on each of them. So let's take a look at the next chapter here, which starts on page 11. Are we really in planetary collapse? And so this one, kind of cultivates some skepticism about, or, answers how there are some climate skeptics. Is this really as bad as, could it possibly be that it's gotten beyond a fixable situation? And the questions for this chapter, they start on page 18, the discussion questions for chapter 2. The first one, how does it make you feel to consider that we might be in the midst of planetary collapse? So just give some time to our feelings about how we're receiving this information. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I went through this. I was in the book club for this last year as well, so I've had a year to kind of orient and kind of reassess. Just for me personally, when I hear the word collapse, it can be like I normally think of that as like a more immediate thing. Um, but also understanding that a lot of times you have like this long curve, slightly goes up, and then like it makes this hockey stick. So um, as well, so there could be accelerating. But and then it talked about in the book how collapse of certain civilizations like Rome and such occurred over decades, maybe like hundreds of years, depending on where you start it and end it. Um, and then so planetary collapse is not necessarily, it's not, it's felt at different paces depending on where you are in the world. Who's being extracted from, who's at the top of the pyramid, is at least how we have it is set up on our planet at this point in time. So there's lots of people that have been experiencing it for quite a long time, quite harshly, and then there's other people. I'm going to put myself in that category, who have hardly felt it at all. I mean, comparatively speaking. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be like a really long process, but then there's all these different things happening at different paces, and I don't want to take up too much time. So I'll just stop there. That gets the essence of it, I think.
Thanks, Dave. Bryce?
Yeah, none of it actually surprised me because I've been expecting it to happen since the early 1970s. I had read Paul Ehrlich's original book, Population Bomb, and then his better book, which came out a couple years later, End of Affluence, and then his Population Resources Environment book also. But then also the Club of Rome report, I went over that with a fine-tooth comb when it came out in paperback in the early 1970s, and it kind of defined my entire outlook on this whole thing. I knew that we were heading for overshoot already 55 years ago. And it doesn't surprise me. I'm shocked it took this long because they were able to go and take an air pump and keep inflating that dead goat until it would float again, as far as the monetary system went. So, as far as which evidence I find to be the most convincing that we're in planetary collapse, the fact that so many people are finally beginning to recognize it and talk about it. I felt quite alone among my peers for many years. They looked at me like I was crazy when I would talk about these things at work and about how dangerous the chemicals we worked with and such were because I worked at a chemical plant. And so I knew all about the buildup of chemicals in the biosphere and all this kind of stuff and the precautions to take and everything else. And I would tell people about these things, about what we were using and try to get them educated on it. And I had one guy come up to me in the 2000 aughts, say about 20 years ago, and he said, I used to think that you were full of fill in the blank word, but now I know you were right. And I said, well, gee, Greg, thanks. All those years he thought I was full of it. But yes, it's good to see people are coming on to the recognition that we have been on the wrong path.
Thanks, Bryce. Juniper?
Yeah, I'm getting love attacked by a dog. I love hearing you say that, Bryce, because I've been hyper aware of this since I was like 8 years old. I was raised to be like my great grandmas were both like, this is going to be a completely different world when you're in your 40s, and we need to train you and prepare you for what's to come. Like, I mean, it wasn't like doomsday level. It was like they knew with a surety in their bones that this was coming, and they made sure that they passed down all of their knowledge so that that would be retained to get through all of this. And like I've been watching, like I was the serious little kid that watched PBS and read encyclopedias. I haven't that my entire life, like I don't remember a time before I had collapse awareness. There's no memories. Oh, that when I was 5, I'll tell you the definitive moment that I was aware of climate collapse when I was 5, and I was watching Sesame Street, and they were talking about how there's finite water in the world, and they did there was a whole thing about water. Totally blew my little 5-year-old mind. I was following everybody around, turning off the water, turning off the lights after them after that. And I've just been like, like, yeah. So it's like I have no awareness of a time before awareness of it. And I've been trying to do what I can to work towards helping, mitigate that in any way that I can. But I have to admit that being aware of it for my whole life, it's been a little bit, it in some ways made it feel more futile because so many people weren't aware of what I was aware of. Like what you're saying, like everyone's acting like I'm overreacting, and it makes it hard to engage on the subject when people aren't taking it seriously.
For sure, for sure. Thanks for sharing that. And Sarah?
Yeah, my experience has been basically like the opposite of that. Like my most of my life, people have not talked about this. And I do remember like points throughout my childhood, and then especially after going to college for a little bit, noticing like different changes in the environment and feeling like something's not right, but not having any language to be able to articulate it, and not realizing that everything was so connected. So like this last year has been like the first time in my life where I am aware. I'm not necessarily like settled into the acceptance part of it, because I feel very by myself in this way, like even within my household. And so that's like something that I'm trying to like sit with so that I can maintain sanity, so that I can help the people around me to, get up to speed essentially. But yeah, like there's grief, there's sadness, there's anger, just a lot of like feeling like I've been cheated a bit. So like I'm glad that we're having these discussions here, and I can get some resourcing so that I can go out into my neighborhood and at the kitchen table and talk to people about what we can be doing and how we can prepare ourselves in a way that is aligned, and not just like the, oh, let's go out and like buy a bunch of stuff kind of prepare. I'm talking about like, how do we grieve together, find ways to make rituals that hold us through this time? Because collapse isn't, that's the other thing. Like when I was talking to my sister about collapse, I feel like there's always like something missing from like planetary collapse. It's like there's an implied part that doesn't get said as much, because I feel like we're really focusing on like the scary, like destructive part of it. And the part that's implied, at least from where I'm standing, is what is going to come out of it, like what is being made, because like death is a part of life too. And so the death of like all these things that we are used to, things that we expect, even like not just socially, but like environmentally, they will give way to something new. So the question is, are we going to be on the other side of that newness? And how are we going to hold ourselves? How are we going to act accordingly now, knowing all that? So I'll pause there.
This is an amazing conversation. Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Sarah, I really resonate with what you were saying about, I forget your exact words, but being lied to, um, or something to that effect. That really resonates to me. And I think that goes back to chapter one of the stories, that we're told growing up in the school systems, by our parents, by our neighbors, by our community, all of it. Um, and this is Mother Nature kind of forcing us to remember how to come back into right relationship with her and with everyone else and all our kin. Yeah, that's what comes up for me with that. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Dave. And I'm thinking too of like the collapsing of just commenting on Sarah's comment there about kind of the collapsing of systems, creating making the nutrients available to be digested into the new systems. And yeah, I'm sitting with that. I appreciate that. Bryce.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in that there's been a few authors and speakers who have dealt with the grief side of this whole thing about and Joanna Macy being one of the most well-known ones, but also Stephen Herod Booner. Uh, he's a herbalist, died just a couple of years ago. Wrote a book called Earth Grief: The Journey into and Through Ecological Loss. And basically, he says to us, okay, grieve, then get over it. We got a lot of stuff to do here. But he's at the same time, he's recognizing the grief. He's talking about grief, and he's talking about how to get through it. And I found that book helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to speak just to what Sarah said. Yeah, the grief thing is so important. And one thing we were talking about in another one of these meetings, someone mentioned that like grief and love are kind of go hand in hand. But also remember, we're not actually talking about the planet or nature necessarily, because she will always adjust herself. She will always create new life. She will always somehow find a way through. What we're really talking about is humanity, because we are we're one of the most fragile species, and we're the most destructive, but we're also one of the most fragile. So what we are really talking about in climate collapse is about retaining humanity, because we've already replaced most of the wildlife with our livestock anyway. Like we're not really in a position to be conserving the biodiversity to the way that we would like to. We really are talking about saving ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Sarah, I see your comment in here. Do you want to put some voice to that?
I fully agree with what Juniper is saying. Like when I was talking with my sister about this, it wasn't like, oh, we got to save the planet. It's literally, where are we in this story? Are we going to be here later or not? And that's that's what we're talking about. So I'm glad that you voiced that. Yeah.
Great, great. I am the taskmaster here with the timer, and we have about 6 more minutes on this chapter with two more questions. So maybe I'll kind of do the same thing of combining them, or feel free to answer whatever speaks to you. And because we did hear Bryce talk a little bit about the evidence that he finds to be convincing that we are in planetary collapse, which is question number 2. And question number 3, where are your doubts and suspicions about the story that Joe Brewer just told about planetary collapse, where, kind of doing both sides of that, what's compelling and what still gives you question. And I'll also acknowledge that in the chat here, Dave, and I also, Bryce, Dave Wolf is asking if Bryce would share some book recommendations either in the chat here or I think even better in that book club space, because I think there are a lot of books there's a bookshelf basically in the book club to put some
Okay.
recommendations in there, and yeah, there's some good wisdom here. Yeah, Dave.
Try and kick off where at least on the last one, what are your doubts and suspicions? And then maybe in the next chapter, that they talk about are we good or bad for the environment? I forget what the exact question is. But there are ways of changing this. Humans and cultures have demonstrated before that they can live in harmony and in like a upward spiral, in the context in which they live. And I don't, if I'm going to be honest, I don't know enough to evaluate. I haven't gone through and evaluated all the different things, like what is it, the Stockholm Center or Stockholm with the thresholds and things. So I haven't made the time yet to go through and look at, in a deep way at all these different things. I don't understand it. So right now I'm trusting a lot of people who I think are really smart and have good hearts and kind of know what they're talking about. So that's, I think I'm right. I often have a pretty good intuition, but I'm a human being and I screw up too. So that's part of, more of my journey is understanding those things more deeply. So yeah, I guess that's where I'm at on that question.
Great, and thank you for bringing home the Stockholm Resilience. I dropped the link into the chat for the planetary boundaries, which we are now up to 7 of 9 planetary thresholds we've crossed. Juniper, thank you.
I just want to kind of go backwards and speak to what you were just talking about humans. This is a big problem that I've had talking with people in the permaculture world about like they look at us as parasites when in the reality you choose to be a parasite or not. If all of humanity were to completely shift their worldview right now, like we can't ever go back to the old world. That's just not happening. The old world is gone. The insects, the birds, everything, it has to be something new. But if everyone were to completely shift the way that they looked at extraction and stewardship and all those things, we could do a dramatic turnaround as humanity. So we are not inherently parasites on the land. It's 100% a choice. But as far as there's like the tipping points you're talking about, the biggest tipping point that I look at is first soil acidification, the fact that ocean acidification, the fact that the ocean is saturated with carbon, and once that happens, it can only saturate in the air after that point, and that the polar vortex and the currents of the ocean have changed. Once those things happen, they don't go back to the way they were. It doesn't mean that we're going to be in total, it doesn't mean that we're guaranteed with total destruction. It just means that everything can't go back to the way that it was. It's going to have to be something new. Whether that something new is going to be viable for human life or not, that's debatable. But there's also, I also have trust that nature, we don't know everything. Our scientists don't know everything. The earth has its own self-healing mechanisms. So there's always also that possibility that the self-healing mechanisms of the earth that in our small minds as just little specks on this earth can't comprehend, that the earth may be capable of doing things that we could never imagine. So, no one knows what the future is going to look like, is the reality.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Juniper. Sarah?
Um, when I first read the last question about like doubts and suspicions, uh, like immediately I was like, no, I don't have any doubts or suspicions. Like this makes sense. Like finally, somebody's saying the thing. But I was also like I wanted to also think about the people around me who were more likely to say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't line up with what I've been taught or what I've been told. And it just like it points to I feel like it points to the separation that we've experienced from Earth itself. And so, like, there's this fear that makes us want to say, well, this can't be true. Because if it is true, then I have to do something. And that's too much for me to hold, especially in a culture, especially like the United States culture of like everything's about the individual. And if there's a problem, you have to fix it, you have to solve it. So, like, the urge to say, well, if planetary collapse is real, then I have to fix it by myself. And we don't really know what it is to like be in community and hold a hard thing together. And that means that we also have to figure that out too. And we're also afraid of like making mistakes and being wrong. And so there's like all these things that tumble out once you acknowledge something to be true that upsets the way that you look at the world. And so, like, there's that portion that came up for that question. But then also, I was thinking about how, like, the evidence for collapse for me that I would probably refer to when I'm talking to other people who might not necessarily be like on the same page initially is the social or like the feeling that we are experiencing. Like in Metachrysalis, I love the framing of Metacrisis and Metachrysalis as like ways to explore like these stories that we have and like showing the agency that we have. But like the two cards that I focus on the most are Soul Split and Earth Erosion, and I feel like they go together. And so like since I can see in myself, I feel disconnected from other humans and all of my ecosystem. Like that's the evidence for me. So if I ask someone like, how well do you know your neighbors? And not just your human neighbors, but your animal, fungi, and flora neighbors, like what is that for you? And it builds from there. So if we can address the soul split, I feel like that automatically starts us moving in that direction of sitting with and doing what we need to do about the earth erosion part, because earth will take care of herself. She's got it. It's us that we need to start like being real with what we're doing. So I'll pause there.
Great, great sharing. And I think Juniper is sorting seeds or something as
I,
we
I, I, I wanted to actually show it to Sarah. So what, after this whole, after telling you what I told you about, my whole life, the conclusion I came to, I live in an incredibly harsh climate where it's almost impossible to grow food. So I focus all of my attention on breeding end of the world seeds. I focus my entire life is now devoted to breeding seeds. I live at 7,400 feet in northwest New Mexico. We have maybe 100 and something day growing season. So because I'm like, I live in this climate, this is setting me up to have the ability to actually really breed end of the world seeds that can grow in the harshest climates possible. So even after everything I know, I realize I'm going to get overwhelmed. I need to hyper focus on the one thing that I can really do, and because of where I live, this is what I can really do. And so I'm just sorting out. These are going into my seed bank where I store my genetics. So that if I lose genetics, I'm taking one of each color. These are genetically diverse crops. These are crops that have been backbred and backbred and backbred to have incredible genetic diversity. And so I'm saving that back genetic diversity in case you have a cataclysm, which can happen at 7,400 feet, and I lose everything. I have one of every being in my bank.
beautiful, beautiful. Well, I am looking at the time, and I think we need to jump into the last chapter to give it a good 15 minutes here. Or I mean, the third chapter, our last chapter for tonight. Are you saying humans are bad for the planet? Is the title of this chapter. And that can be kind of hard to sit with as well. The idea that human caused climate change, and, if we'd be better off not doing these things. On page 26 are the discussion questions for chapter 3. The first one is, were you surprised to learn that some human cultures have lasted thousands of years by integrating themselves into their landscapes? Well, the permaculturists here maybe not surprised. How might this kind of evidence inform your role as a person seeking to regenerate the earth? The second question here, what does it actually mean to be functionally adapted to your environment? How does this relate to the ethics of being in some kind of right relationship with the ecosystems on which our cultural survival depends? And the third question, how might you learn about or partner with cultures that have a track record of sustainability? Yeah, Bryce.
Yeah, I figured nobody was going, so I better start talking really fast here. Okay, no, I'm not surprised to know that there's longstanding cultures. As a kid, one of my hobbies was anthropology and archaeology. I was studying like all these old civilizations and stuff. And then as time went on, I discovered that there was even civilizations older, actually verified ones, like the use of smelting iron was not discovered by any of the major um, Middle Eastern civilizations, Greece, Rome, Sumer, none of those, but by uh, a couple thousand BC, actually, in the Danube River Valley, where they were making tools of these things, and that's where they first smelted iron. And then these skills then spread out from that area. And those civilizations that were there were much more matrilinear in in their governance and in their social habits than the ones that followed. They weren't, completely non-warlike. They did have defensive fortifications, but they weren't a patriarchal society. They weren't out there to go and um, conquer vast swatches of territory. So, yeah, I knew about all of that. And how does this kind of evidence inform my role as a person seeking to regenerate the earth? And what's it mean to be functionally adapted to your environment? What I've striven to do is to be aware of where I live, the place, its history, everything, and on both sides of the lake, and of where my ancestors had settled in southern Michigan, straight across the lake in about 100 miles, well, not 100, 50, 60 miles inland, and stuff. It's pretty comparable to here, although the hydrology is a lot different. But understanding those things and being able to go out and walk in my watershed here along Oak Creek, just a block away, and I can follow it all the way down to Lake Michigan. And the smaller creek that's just up the street here called Ebbs Creek goes to the Seven Bridges area of Grant Park. And I know all of these areas, what grows there, the animals that live there, the deer, the fox, the minks, all of them, that the different birds, and I integrate with them all right out here in the yard. We've had the mink come in here and uh, go fishing in our pond. It hung around for about 3 days and culled some of the fish. We had too many fish. The mink came and, just appeared one day and took care of that problem and took all the mid-sized fish. So we just had the little ones and the big ones. Big ones were too big for the mink. The little ones are too small to bother with. Perfect. And so that, and then the plants that grow around here, knowing what's native, what's not, knowing what the history of the area is. At the end of the block, it was said to have been a Potawatomi Indian village. People used to find arrowheads down there. I kind of doubt that it might have been a village because it is prone to flooding, but the flooding may be more to do with current ways of doing things, but also how we change the landscape around here and how we can change it back. It's like all of these things that it's part of knowing where you are, knowing where you live, and feeling in your heart that you are a part of this and that you can relate to it, and that you can see it across space and time, both backwards and going forwards.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Juniper?
So when I hear talk about wanting to do things in ways that indigenous cultures, even European indigenous cultures, um, everyone in those cultures in those times who lived that way were migratory. They had vast lands that they worked with other groups to hunt. Everyone's like, okay, well, you get the hunting, you get this hunting area this year, I get to forage this foraging area this year. And the reality is that those systems are impossible. I live on the Dominion Nation here, and I know that I've seen people who, like they want to go out and hunt and everything. The deer are gone. Like there's not really any deer left. Climate change is causing the deer to go away. We hardly have any else left. Everyone's like telling people on the reservation here, oh, you should just go hunt or whatever. It's like that. The water's gone. Like where are we going to forage? People have been too busy living in poverty and not even having vehicles to go out and maintain foraging. And foraging areas are not just natural; those are gardens that humans have tended generationally, and those have all been let go. Like my dad worked on a project with that, with trying to redo biscuit root, and it was just like these are things that communities have to tend, not just sporadic groups of people. So we have lost these vast swaths of land to industry that we really needed to produce food for people. And so we have to find a new way. But you have to find a new way, but with using the old mindset. Because the world isn't like the old world, but we have to bring the consciousness of the old world into a whole new way of doing things that supports the population that we have on the earth right now.
That really resonates with me. Like acknowledging the importance of how things have been done and being able to take what is applicable for the future and finding new ways to apply those things. And sometimes it means we have to let go of some stuff that we've loved like really, really, really hard. And I think like the last question, my sister and I were marking on like this kind of energy that we were feeling about like kind of like orphan energy, like just like not knowing where to turn for like support because of that long disconnection that we've experienced. And it's like within our family specifically, just because like our family history has been like there's been a lot of things that don't get talked about. And so we're aware that we have European, African, Indigenous, Native American people in our family, but we don't know where. We don't know how long ago, all these kind of things. And so like since we don't know that about the past, then that means that we've had to find new ways to tend to family in the present and how we want to tend to family in the future while still honoring these people that we don't know. And so like that also applies to how we're looking to reconnect with the land, the people who were originally here, the Cherokee and Muskogee, were like forced to leave. And so there really aren't that many people to turn to and ask what was here before. How did y'all tend to this land, and how can we do that here and now, and what will we do in the future? And so like that energy of finding new ways feels very accessible to me right now, just because I haven't had that option of anything else. And so in the meantime, it's looking like walking around my neighborhood and along the river and meeting new beings who are new to me but have always been here, and at every morning, and then at night I do what I call an ecosystem prayer, and I just name all the beings I can name so far, and the list gets longer. So I'm thankful for small things that I can hold on to while I'm trying to learn these kind of things. I'll pause there.
I need to blurt for a minute. There's this app called iNaturalist. It's a letter I in naturalist, and you can record all of your local findings, and you can see what other people are also finding in your area and identifying. That's a really great way to get intimately connected with the creatures and plants in your area.
Thank you for sharing that, Juniper. Actually, that coincides with I was coming home. Uh, I don't know, from somewhere earlier today. Got it out of the car in the driveway, and I see new stuff coming up in the yard. I'm like, I wonder what that is. I'm gonna get out my phone and my iNaturalist app. So I took about like 6 or 7 different pictures of things. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder. And so I started thinking about. I want to find out more about what that does in my yard and how does that affect the other things. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, and that kind of resonates with me. So it's nice to hear from another source.
Yeah. And the other beauty of it is that people check your work. If you misidentify something, somebody will tell you.
Bryce.
I'd like to add in here, because we can close to the end, about having been blessed with meeting and working with so many people, unlike myself. I'm white, obviously, Caucasian, of European descent, but um, I grew up around a lot of Polish-speaking people, and um, my first landlord was a Ukrainian retired carpenter who worked at Schlitz Brewing, and had a hard time understanding that guy, but he was interesting. George Penchenko, and then later working with people who'd come up from down south when the industries started to expand more up in the north, and uh, rural people from down south, they came up here and started getting jobs so that they could get better. I worked with a lot of them, and they were different than me and talked different and had a different culture, and just learning from them what they were like. Then we had a next door neighbor who was um, Winnebago Indian, indigenous Winnebago from up in the Green Bay area, and he taught me a lot of what I knew about hunting. He and I would go deer hunting and squirrel hunting a lot of times. And then later, I have a friend who's Nathan Wright, who's out of um, Petoskey, Michigan. He goes foraging and has a business selling his foraged medicine goods that he makes. And I learned a lot just talking to him about his culture and stuff. And then in the Green Party years, had another friend, an associate up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Linda Cree, and we corresponded a lot about what the issues were for the tribes up there and how the Green Party could help. So just learning all these different people, people from India, people from Egypt, people from Syria, people from Turkey, all these areas, the people that I've known, uh, I I feel blessed to have had them be a part of helping me become who I am.
Great. Thank you, Bryce. We are almost at time here. I'm wondering if there's any closing thoughts anyone wants to share. For next week, we'll read 3 more chapters, and we'll do it same system again. I'm looking at Juniper seed offerings, blessings to your seeds, and I feel blessed by even hearing your story about these survival seeds. Um,
I got a quick question for Juniper. Are you growing any um oh great, forgot what you're calling now. Forget it. It's a small bean that grows in very it grows in the Southwest, very um heat
Are you
tolerant.
talking about
Again,
peppery beans? Are you
pepperies, that's
talking
it.
about peppery beans?
Yes, the
Yes.
peppery beans.
Ooh, Blue speckled peppery are the ones that do the best up here, but I'm going to be working with Joseph Lofthouse peppery beans this year. But yeah, the peppery beans are the ancestors of modern beans, and they can grow on one good
No, no,
monsoon.
they're totally separate. Modern beans, as we know them, like the kidney bean, those are actually domesticated in the eastern woodland provinces, believe it or not. Uh, check Natalie Muller's work on that.
Mhm.
She's a plant ethnobotanist, did a lot of research on
Um,
sunflowers and beans
these
and such.
these beans, these beans are the ones that were mostly developed further south. The runner type beans also.
Yeah,
There's a bunch of different. There's a bunch of different types of beans. But yeah, you're talking about the kidney type beans. But there's a bunch of different like sub. I don't know the scientific aspect of them. I get to know the plants like personally, but the scientific aspect and the scientific names have not been something I have an education on.
I got
But
really
I know the
weird into
run.
plants about 30 years ago and spent all my break times at work studying books on plants. So, and then growing them, especially beans. I was big into growing beans and corns too for quite a while, trying to develop my own varieties.
Love
I don't
it.
do that anymore though.
Love it.
I primarily conserve indigenous scientists' work and then work to make it even more drought tolerant and more conservation
It's good.
based.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you all so much for our first, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, our first meetup. And we'll see you again in a week. I'll probably see you online sometime before then. Those of you in Wisconsin, don't forget to vote tomorrow. And and
Exactly.
we'll see you all next week. Have a good one.
You too.
Take care.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.